This webinar was recorded for subrecipients of the Tennessee Strong Families Grant on February 24th, 2025. Christina Casterline, SWRP's prevention consultant for Families First Prevention Services Act, FFPSA, was our subject matter expert presenter. This training was designed to teach participants the building blocks of the HOPE framework, which stands for Healthy Outcomes from Positive Experiences, learn more about protective experiences that can help heal the brain from trauma, and discuss how relationships, environment, engagement, and emotional growth can encourage positive outcomes for families. The slides and reference materials are posted on our webpage for your reference and review.
Thank you, Crystal and Chase. Glad to be with you this morning. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for all the representation from your agencies. I have presented before, so it might look a little familiar to you. I presented on community partnerships, and so today I'm going to be talking about positive childhood experiences. So our agenda for today, or the objectives, are to talk about how we're kind of transitioning from ACEs to PCEs. So not that, ACEs is going away, but just that, we're kind of shifting our mindset to more positive experiences working with children and families, which leads us to the HOPE framework. So that's kind of where all this research came from, is the HOPE framework. So we're going to learn about that. And then talking about attachment, so the attachment cycle, and then how that contributes to our attachment styles and how those are impacted by the relationships that we encounter as we get older. Strengthening families, that's where the protective factors comes from. So we're going to talk about that framework as well, and just kind of review those protective factors a little bit. Then we're going to talk about well-being and what does that look like in families, and the clients that you all are working with. How do we know that families have achieved a certain level of well-being? So we're going to kind of describe that a little bit, and then talk about resilience. So thinking about resilience, really thinking about how our own personal resilience makes us able to overcome our trauma, any obstacle that we face. And then how using a strengths-based approach is really critical when we're working with families, because we know that if we shift our mindset to more of those strengths, then we're going to see better outcomes with families. And then lastly, just talking about the science of the positive, and how a lot of that has to do with the social norms, and just thinking about how just shifting that gear in our mindset to be more positive. So that's a full agenda for today. If you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to drop that in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, that's fine. I'll have Crystal helping me out with the chat in case I'm talking and are not paying attention. She's going to interrupt for me. So just feel free, and I'll try to stop along the way as well too. So just to get us started, we are kind of moving away from just focusing so much on the negative aspect of ACEs. So ACEs is very important to know about, because it does have a huge impact on our health and development. It's where all that adversity and the trauma comes from, and it definitely does change our brain chemistry. It changes the epigenetics of how that trauma impacts each generation. But the positive news is that we can do things to heal that. And so that's where those positive childhood experiences come in, because we're kind of shifting away from looking at things from an adversity lens to looking at it from a resilience lens. So that's going to be important just to kind of think about as we go through this information today. So we know that PCEs can promote well-being even when those ACEs have occurred. So that's good news for us. So children need to be exposed to consistent and predictable nurturing and enriching experiences to be able to develop the capacity for, positive health, to have that happiness, to be productive citizens, to have some creativity, be able to express themselves. So that's really important when we think about positivity. So there's a couple opportunities for you all to participate. I'm going to ask you some questions about, what comes to mind when you think of positive childhood experiences? Is there a certain event that happened when you were a child that really brought your family together? Or if you could think of some words like to describe an experience, just go ahead and pop that in the chat. Okay, vacation. You had a lot of laughter. Family trips. Okay, that's good. Family time, family meals, travel, graduating, right? Those events that bring people together, like a graduation, that's good because sometimes you see a lot of family that you wouldn't normally see. Playing outside with friends, holidays, weddings. So what are some feelings that you associate with these positive childhood experiences? Barbecues. I need an invite to the barbecue for sure. Gotta love that. Creating positive memories, happiness, closeness. Okay, that's great. Staying active together, experiencing new things. Okay. So that's good. If you all had those experiences, not every family has those opportunities to take a vacation or go on a family trip or, do a lot of the things that families do. So it's great that you've had that experience, and those memories are things that you carry with you into your adulthood. And, obviously as parent, if you're a parent now, you want to create that same environment for your child or children as you're experiencing these things. It brings to memory those good feelings, that connectedness, that bonding time. So those are all opportunities to build some of those protective factors as well. So that's great. So it kind of leads us into our HOPE framework. So as we said, we're going to talk about this. So HOPE stands for Healthy Outcomes from Positive Experiences. And this is based on some research that Dr. Bethel has done, and Christina Bethel and Dr. Sagi. So they have done some research to really look at how positive experiences can help outweigh the negative. And so we know that, those ACEs have an impact on us. The higher number of ACEs, the more likelihood there is of those health conditions, those types of things. If you are not familiar with the ACEs, we'll probably have one on our website that you can view. Is there anybody that has not had the ACEs training yet? If you could put that in the chat if you have not. Okay. So I definitely encourage you to still, try to seek out some training on that so you can get that on our website, Schwartz website. If somebody could put that in the chat as a reference, that would be great. We have lots of consultants across the state that do training, so that would be one of them. And so there's just a lot that positive childhood experiences help to promote that resilience. And then, the ACEs would be a risk factor. So you've got resilience and then you've got risk factors. So we're constantly kind of weighing all that out, trying to balance that. So we don't want to have too much negativity weighing us down. So we know that if we kind of try to balance that scale with some more positive outcomes, then that will increase our likelihood of the happiness and success and prosperity that we all want. So many studies have also demonstrated the association between adverse childhood experiences and things like adult depression or poor mental health. inadequate social or emotional support, and more recent work shows how positive experiences buffer all of those negative lifelong health effects. So when we use this hope framework, we're emphasizing that the improving the lives of children that are exposed to experiences or conditions that create that toxic stress or trauma, that requires expanding our conventional approach to responding to ACEs by alleviating the importance of maximizing those positive experiences for children. So that's where this hope framework comes in, and we're going to talk about some building blocks for that. So the 4 building blocks are relationships, environment, engagement, and emotional growth. And I'm sure right now you can think of examples for those, but we're going to take some time to kind of go through each one and give you some things that you can actually take action on to build these positive childhood experiences within yourself and within your community and those that you work with. So when we're thinking about relationships, it is a fact that individuals that recall having nurturing and supportive relationships during childhood experience those lower rates of depression and poor mental health during adulthood. So we know that is a fact based on research that's shown that. And we know that there are all kinds of relationships that we're talking about. And these can be those foundational relationships with parents that are going to respond to that child's need and offer warm and responsive reactions. So we know we talked about that serve and return, that reciprocal relationship is so important in building that attachment. So when we think about relationships, we think about the bonding that occurs and the attachment that occurs. So adults that are outside of the family can also take an interest in a child to support their growth and development. So it doesn't have to be that immediate family. It can be any important relationship in that child's life, whether it's other family members or even a mentors, school teachers. You all are considered part of that relationship. So it goes to show you just the important impact that you all have in the work that you're doing. So things that you can do are connect with the children that are around you, engaging in those serve and return interactions. So just like we did with our activity, thinking about the positive childhood experiences that you all remember from your childhood, you can also do that with your clients that you're working with and ask them to recall a time that was positive. And what can they do to ensure that their current children are also having the opportunity to engage in those same types of activities or events or whatever it was that stood out to you that you listed in the chat. Other things are like sharing information about things that are going on at the school, after school activities, or just like parent events or community events that can be helpful to build that connection. So that's really what we're looking at, is trying to build that connection when we have those strong relationships. So in previous trainings, I've also shared about that eco map and just really using that as a tool to kind of see, what other relationships are in that child's life or your client's life, and kind of mapping that out so you can see like who else in your life would you consider to be a support to you. So thinking about how to expand that out and gather more resources for that family based on those relationships. It can really be important. Next, we have environment. So the fact is that children who live, learn, and play in safe, stable, and equitable environments are less likely to experience poor mental and physical health as adults. So our goal is to help create that safe, stable environment for children. And so, we think about our schools and, bullying and gun violence and those types of things. So, what can we do to ensure our children are being safe when they go to school is a huge task, it seems, just to advocate for that safety, whatever we need to do to create that safe environment. Because if children do not feel safe going to school, then that's going to impact their learning and their development. So it's very critical that they feel safe in their surroundings. So that includes their homes. Their home, they're going to spend just as much time in their home as they are school. So of course those homes need to be safe, stable, and loving. And then also play areas. So we want to prevent any kind of, injuries or things like that. So play areas should be safe and equitable for all children. That's key when you're thinking about environment. And then engagement. So children need to feel loved, appreciated, and connected to their communities. So that's what it's all about, is building that connectedness, feeling engaged. So that you can do that by getting involved in social events, being respectful of other people's cultures. There's lots of different languages and cultures that, you've got to kind of be versed in, because all your clients don't look or act the same. Everybody is different. They come from a different background. So just being aware of that, being knowledgeable about that, so that you can always, be respectful when you're interacting with your clients that are of a different culture or speak a different language. You can also create customs and traditions that will kind of set, those future expectations. So whether it's, those barbecues, or, maybe your tradition is every year you go to the same place for vacation. So that is something that you're doing to kind of, build that capacity for within your family when you create that as a tradition. And then volunteering in the community. So there's no better way to really get to know your community than to volunteer and be a part of it. So think about ways that you can engage others in your community to find out where those needs are and where you can be of service. And then last, we have emotional growth. So the fact is that children need opportunities to develop their emotions, to be able to feel supported during difficulties. So a lot of that has to do with, how are they able to even express their emotions? Do they understand their emotions? Can they put a name on it? How are those emotions connected to how their body is feeling? So we internalize a lot of how we feel about things. So, how are they able to self-regulate? That goes into emotional growth. How are they able to be able to, self-soothe themselves? How are they able to engage in play? Are they fearful about play? Are they fearful about others? Are they able to engage in problem solving? Working well as a team, you see that all through school age children. They're constantly learning how to connect with others socially, how to solve problems, how to work together. So there's a lot that goes under emotional growth. Any questions at this point or comments? Okay, don't see any in the chat. So we'll keep going, talking about some strategies. Hopefully this all is important to you, and you're getting something out of it. Some other strategies based on that HOPE framework are promoting positive health and well-being, which we're going to talk about. Supporting those positive parenting practices and healthy child development. A lot of what you're doing, working with your clients, is educating them on positive parenting and knowing what to expect from their child. And then encouraging that multi-generational approach. So when you have one client and you don't really look at, like, anybody else in the family, it can be limiting. So you're only getting one perspective. But when you take a bigger approach to things and look at other people in the client's life, you get a better picture of what's really going on with that family, and then you can help them better. And then you want to establish opportunities for building those protective factors, which we're going to go over those so you're a little bit more familiar with what those are. So those are the main strategies that we're going to focus on with the HOPE framework. And one of those is components is the attachment. So we've talked about this before previously, but the attachment is something that develops over time. So as you have a new baby, a new mom, they're learning how to identify that baby's cues. What is a hungry cry? What is a tired cry? What is a I'm just bored cry? What is a I'm overstimulated cry? So there's a lot for a new parent to have to learn about how to meet that baby's needs. And so there's going to be opportunities where, the parent doesn't get it right. I mean, I know I'm a parent myself, so I didn't get it right. I messed up a lot of times. Um, so we call that a rupture in the attachment cycle. But with every rupture, there's an opportunity to repair that. So you can get it right the next time, right? Because as a parent, you're just really learning. It's a process of learning. There's a new baby that's come into the earth, and you're trying to figure out how to meet its needs. And, children don't come with an instruction guide. We know that. So parenting classes can help educate, support. Parent support's really important as far as with other parents. Um, but all that goes into that attachment cycle. And what results is as a style. So we all have these styles that come out of this attachment cycle. And so that can really impact us even as adults and as we're growing all through the lifespan. We see these different types of styles. So if you have a child that is born kind of in a very chaotic environment, maybe their needs met sometimes and sometimes it's not, and there's just like a lot of rupture and repair going on, then you might have a more anxious child, so or an avoidant child. So obviously the most important would be the secure attachment, to have that type of attachment style where you're secure, your needs are met, you feel comfortable, you're confident, and you can have good relationships. So that would be the end goal, is to have that secure style. But these other styles can result when there's been a lot of rupture and repair. Maybe there's been a lot of inconsistency. So we develop these attachment styles even into our adulthood that can impact our relationships. Trying to get my people to move. It's a lot on one screen. Anyway. So like we talked about in relationships, those attachment styles refer to certain behaviors or patterns of behaviors based on those early childhood experiences. So it's important to know which style you are. Which one do you tend to be on the side of? Are you more avoidant or are you more anxious? There's different styles, and it's just really important that you understand your own style, because that can impact how you view relationships, and even in the relationships that you have with your clients or your clients themselves. I think there is like a little free test that you can take online to figure out what your attachment style is. So if you wanted to check that out, you can do that. Another thing about secure attachments is they have a love of learning. So, they have that confidence within themselves. So maybe they've been exposed to lots of situations or experiences where, that it's gone successful for them. They've had good outcomes. So they are going to want to build on that by continuing to learn new things and put themselves in situations that are new. They're more comfortable in new situations because they have that confidence. They know themselves. They have a sense of awareness. They're able to reflect on themselves, experience that emotional growth, which is one of the building blocks that we talked about. They have those positive social skills, so they're going to have good relationships with other people. They're going to have that understanding, that compassion, and they're going to be more committed in their relationships instead of avoiding relationships. They thrive on that commitment and having that morality. So there's a lot of positive aspects to having that secure attachment. And so even if you have a tendency to be on the anxious side or the avoidant side, you can work on that. So there's there's skills and things that you can do to change the style that you are to be more secure, because that's the goal, that we all want to be secure in our relationships. So one thing you can do is building those protective factors. So the protective factors are listed here on this, the second row. So we've got parental resilience. That's that ability for that parent to overcome the adversity and challenges that they face. That is a strength. So that's a great thing. Social connections. So when we think about, who we're connected to, when we think about an eco map and who all is involved in that child's life or that client's life, having those connections, it's important. And then that knowledge of parenting and child development. How do they know like what to expect or how to build that attachment? Have they learned by now what all those emotional cues the emotional cues are? Because over time that's going to change. So that child at an infant's not going to be the same as a kindergartner. So they're constantly changing. So you have to kind of know what to expect with each developmental age. And then concrete support in times of need. So who can families rely on if they have a crisis or a need? Do they know who to call? Do they know about the resources that are available in their community? So that's a big part of what you all are doing is helping connect them to those resources. And you are a resource in yourself. So, you can check that box that, my clients have that concrete support in times of need. They've got that protective factor. So what can you do to build the other ones to help them be successful? And then the social and emotional competence of children. So that child kind of understanding their feelings, this all kind of ties in with that hope framework and those hope strategies. So all this fits together. It's just called different things, but it all flows, which I love. um, and then I like this slide because it shows you what you can do just in everyday interactions to build those protective factors, which is really, really important. And so this National Alliance of Children's Trust and Prevention Funds, they also offer training on this topic if you're interested in learning more about these protective factors. And then I believe also that you all will get some training on protective factors coming up in a couple of months as well. So that's great. So some other things about the Strengthening Families approach is they do use a 2-generation approach at least. Multi-generation is best, but they want at least a 2-generation approach, which would be, working with that parent and the child at least. They do consider culture as relevant. It's one of the things that was under that community building is just being understanding of different cultures. They also use a strength-based approach, which is what we're going to talk about. They understand the biology of stress, which kind of gets into those ACEs, the adversity, and how that impacts brain development and future development. So they understand the biology of stress and how that's critical in shaping the outcome. And then resilience theory. So kind of like strengths-based, but resilience, we've talked about that several times already. We're going to get a little bit more detailed in a minute. And then well-being, which we're also going to share about. And then just being knowledgeable about risk and protective factors. So those risk factors comes from the ACEs. The protective factors comes from the positive childhood experiences. All right. Any questions before we get into the next slides? All right. So the multi-generational approach, we know that adversity in childhood leads to adult health and mental health illnesses, which may be passed through those gene expressions across generations. So, because, we see things like poverty that seems to be generational or chronic health condition that seems to be generational. Those things do get passed through down through the generations. That trauma can change our brain chemistry, which can result in like, why do I keep seeing the same family with the same issues? Because it's kind of part of ingrained into their DNA. So that's why it's important to work with everybody that's in that child's life. When we talk about the ecological model, we think about everybody in that. So you've got the child, the family, the community, how that impacts policy and how we're shaping things through the grander scheme of things. So it's a very holistic approach in working with families. Healthy functioning and success throughout childhood, adolescent, and into adulthood depends on these factors. So cognitive functioning is important. So knowing cognitively that they are loved and that they can experience peace and pleasure and have those bonding opportunities. So also being able to have the cognitive function to perform different tasks. So understanding the roles within a family. So did they have traditional roles or did they have roles where the mom's working, the dad's staying home? So families can look a bazillion different ways. So knowing who is performing within the family and what their roles are, what their functions are, what the children assist with, do they sit down at the table and have meals? Mealtime was one of the things that you all said was, one of the times where you had the bonding. So, what is the function of people? What are their, normal everyday routines and how does that look? Because it's going to look different for each family. And then how do they communicate and interact with each other? So that goes along with their physical health and development, their emotional behavior and functioning, and then their social functioning. So how are they able to provide for their family? Do they have a job? Do they have, are they getting government assistance? Do they have family support? Are they able to get tapped into community resources? So how are they able to meet the needs of the family? And then how do they protect? So if you have children, are they able to protect those children to keep them safe? If they have older adults in the home, are they meeting their needs? Because their needs are going to be different. So how are they able to meet the needs of each of those family members and keep them safe? So all of that are things that we consider when we think about the well-being of family. Other things are serving. So what serves as a buffer between those family members and the children? So are they advocating for their children when it comes to the environment? So we talked about bullying. We talked about gun safety. Are they kind of mediating with the school system or with their community or their members of their government to kind of help promote that overall sense of well-being? How prepared are they to navigate those negative social experiences? So, we're living in very challenging times right now. We've got a lot that is happening. So how are we able to kind of overcome those negative social experiences that are occurring? How are we educating our children? How are we supporting them? The same for those families. So how are we really creating those opportunities to bond and to provide that reciprocal care, to emotionally support one another, to encourage one another, to give each other guidance and hope? So that's really important. And then the ability to resolve conflicts, that is a strength. If you're able to, solve problems, work together, be a part of a team building, your clients are going to come to you and it's going to be, your responsibility to help them in a lot of ways. So they're coming to you for help, which is a good thing because sometimes people don't want to ask for help. Sometimes they're afraid or they're worried about what other people are going to think. They feel like they're going to be judged. So really for a family to seek help is a very good strength. And so we need to really support them and encouraging them like that, it's great that you ask for help, that you don't have to do this alone, that you're leaning on your support systems, which is one of those protective factors. So that's a great thing that those families are building that protective factor, which contributes to their resilience. So they're demonstrating resilience by asking for help, which is great. So we also have to have a sense of self-awareness. So along with the family well-being, which is the broader picture of how everybody working together in that family system is functioning and everything that goes along with that, we also look at the individual level and think about how we are internally aware of our own self. So there's lots of different things that fall under self-awareness. I'm not going to read this list, but there are a lot. When you think about self-esteem versus self-concept, what's the difference between all of those? But it's really about just really knowing yourself and understanding yourself and how you relate to other people. It's about knowing what your triggers are. It's about knowing what your attachment style is. It's all those things that we need to be aware of and have that self-awareness because, we don't exist in a bubble. We exist in a world that's very big, and has a lot of diversity. And, how do we fit into that world picture? And what is our worldview? What are our habits, our patterns? All those things impact how we act in the world and our relationships that we have with one another. So being self-aware is very, very critical. It's one of the necessary skills that we have to have. I'm sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. Trying to get my people out of the way again. Let's see if I need to. Yeah. All right. So we're going to go on to the next slide. So how do you define resilience? Here's another opportunity to kind of share any resilient opportunity that you've had to demonstrate your resilience, which is one of the building blocks for family well-being, self-well-being. And then what does that look like in families that you work with? If you have an example you'd like to share, or any kind of definition you'd like to share, you can pop that in the chat or feel free to come off mute and share as well. Okay, I see one, and then now they're all like flowing like a million miles a minute. That's how my chat works. It's like feast or famine. Continuing forward even during stressful times. Two young parents working together to make sure all the children's needs are being met without them knowing the shortcomings they may have. That's a good one. Finding solutions to problems, showing up even when it's hard, strength in the face of adversity. Resilience can be defined in my words as being able to survive as a unit in bad times and band together for a solution. Resilience is the ability to adapt, overcome, and recover from different situations. All right, that's almost word for word what I have on the screen. So very spot on with your definitions there. Thank you for sharing that example as well. So we can all see examples of human adversity. Not adversity, sorry, resilience, of how we've overcome that adversity. So it's a human capacity to face, overcome, and be strengthened by, and even transformed by the adversities of life. And the word that really stands out the most to me in this definition is the word transformed. So that's actually like meaning to become something else. So adversity does transform us, but we can flip that for adversity to transform us in a positive way instead of having that adversity transform us in a negative way. So that's what I like about positive childhood experiences, is because we do have that ability to transform the adversity into a strength and into something that that we can work with. So that's some good news. So the resilience approach is drawing out those family strengths to meet the challenges that the family is having. You know, a lot of you mentioned also about being able to solve those problems. So like when your family is under attack, say you've got some debt or somebody loses a job or you know, some type of situation where you have to figure out a solution. A lot of you all said that you're able to come up with a solution, and that's what makes your family bond because you are able to meet that challenge with a solution. So that's great. And that's totally what the approach is about. So going back to the HOPE framework, so one of the things that they did during their research is they talked about, they used a 20, I think it's 20 questionnaire to kind of determine what those positive childhood experiences were. And so the Child and Youth Resilience Instrument picks out 7 of those. So the top 7 of those 20 were that the family stood by you. So feeling supported, basically, participating in community traditions. So we talked about that as one of the building blocks. If you had at least 2 adults that were interested in you, you know, paid attention to you, was active in your life that were not your parents, so non-biological or non-biological, doesn't matter, parent or parental figure. If you felt safe and protected at home, which we talked about that in our building blocks, supported by friends, a sense of belonging in high school, which, whew, high school, let's talk about that. That's a whole totally different subject, but a sense of belonging, and then talking to their family about their feelings. So those are, you know, some very major ones that really go into what was evaluated when we're thinking about that HOPE framework. So these are all questions you can ask your clients as well. That'll really build on that resiliency. And then the strengths-based approach. So we know that all families have strengths, and the best way is just really to figure out what those are. You can have the parent tell you what those strengths are, what they think the strengths are, or there might be something that you see as a strength that they're not even aware of. And you'd be like, you know what? You're really good about problem solving. I bet you didn't realize that, but here's an example of something that I've seen you do. And then that can just really change their world because, hey, maybe it's something that they didn't even realize about themselves that somebody else noticed. And that's going to have a really big impact because they didn't have that self-awareness that we talked about. So if your clients don't have that self-awareness, they don't have that emotional growth piece, that's one of those building blocks, then that's where you can come in to really help shape that and show them like, hey, this is a strength that you have. So that's good. And it's good to really, you know what those strengths are, and have that respect for that. So what are some strengths in your own family? You know, because sometimes it's hard, you know, even for me, and I have to think, you know, if you're in a job interview and they're like, what are your strengths? You're like, oh, what am I supposed to say? You know, sometimes we don't even think about what our own strengths are. But you know, that's why I'm asking this question, because sometimes it's difficult in identifying strengths within ourselves because we don't want to be positive. We think about all the bad things that are wrong with us, right? You have that deficit lens that we're going to talk about here in a minute. So put that in the chat. And then why is identifying strengths essential in engaging families? My kids trust me and share with me. Okay, that is a strength. Very good. You're a people person. Yes, Jill, very much so, a people person. Great personality. I know, because I know you personally. I can say that. You're positive, encouragement, and willing to listen. That's great. Generally care about others. I hear feedback often that is felt by others. Ooh, that's good. That's good. It's great when you get that confirmation, when people can reflect back to you the strengths that they see in you. That's great. Listening, that's a good skill, but definitely listening's important. And then having the other person feel that they're being heard, that they have a voice, that what they say matters, very important. Loyal, supportive, and helpful. Good. So keep your own personal strengths in mind. And then why is it important to be able to identify strengths in the families that we're engaging with? Why is that important? Sorry. Keep trying to move my picture and I'm advancing the slides. Strengths of my family are sitting down together and discussing issues such as a family working together towards resolutions to enhance our confidence, to create trust. Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, so you want to come in on that level where they feel like you're trying to engage them, that you're meeting them where they are, that you are not really coming in with your own agenda or your own set of objectives or your own judgments or biases that you may have. You're really coming into that, looking at, where that family is and meeting them where they are is important to empower them exactly. That's great. So some core strengths, we've talked about our attachment, self-regulation, affiliation, attunement, tolerance, and respect. So these are those core strengths that we're talking about when we're building that resilience and we're looking at things from a strengths-based perspective. So these are all very important to keep in mind when you're working with families. And then that deficit lens, like as we shared, it's really easy to come up with the negative things that you see, like in yourself or in others. But focusing on the negative is not going to get you anywhere, right? So we need to change our thinking, have that paradigm shift where we're thinking about things from a strengths-based lens. So instead of looking at families of like, okay, you need this, this, this in order to have that family well-being, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but like don't look at it as like things like this need to be fixed or these are your deficits. It's just all about how you can frame that from a positive perspective. So like, hey, these things are really going to help your family meet your needs and be successful and have that sense of well-being. So I'm here to help support you in that versus these are all the things that you need to do, or these are all your deficits. Like nobody wants to sit and look at a list of their deficits. That's very depressing. So think of their strengths and you'll get a lot further with people and families that you work with when you focus on their strengths than if you're looking at the deficits. And then some other things that you can do to build those everyday interactions is just project that positivity and strength, understanding that family and child's needs and their strengths, providing that parenting education, connecting them with resources, emphasizing self-care, many things you can do. Self-regulation, that's very important because if we are not regulated, then we're not going to be able to relate to others in a regulated manner. So it's really important that we have that self-awareness to know like, hey, if this family is stressing me out, then to take a step back and to not let those emotions and feelings interrupt your capacity to serve and to help. So knowing when you're at your limit or when you're working harder than the other person is, to take a step back and really, self-regulate. So Dr. Bruce Perry has a model that's called the 3 Rs. And so they're listed at the bottom there. So first you have to regulate yourself before you can relate to somebody and before you can go up into those higher brain functions where you are reasoning and the problem solving. So this has to do with our brain functioning. So the basics of our brain function is that, our central nervous system, our heart rate, our breathing, all that stuff. That's where the regulation comes. So being aware with our body being aware of what's going on, how we're feeling, we're regulating those emotions. Once we regulate, then we can relate. Then we can have a conversation because you're not going to get anywhere if you're like mad at each other, right? Think about you and your husband or you and your wife, you can't have a conversation if you're not regulated. And you definitely can't skip up to reasoning when you're not regulated. So this happens in a progression. You have to take those steps in order. So regulate, relate, then you can reason, then you can problem solve because that comes from our prefrontal cortex. So it's all in line with our body chemistry and our brain functioning. So it's part of self-regulation that's really useful to keep in mind. Keep in mind that those stages. And then executive functioning. This is kind of goes into the ACEs thing where you got to really regulate everything that's going on. So if you think of a control tower, they're having to control which plane comes at one time. Hopefully, plane crashes. If we've been dealing with a lot of that lately, but it's a lot to manage. So, how are you able to, direct everything that's going on, manage it in a functional way, and still, get everything done that needs to be done. So that's part of our brain system that goes into motor planning, problem solving, and that self-regulation really fits under that as far as how we problem solve and uh, motor plan and all that stuff. So it's very interesting. I don't really have time to get into a lot of it. Got about 5 minutes, so I'm trying to go a little quick through the rest of these slides. But the science of positive, their key components are spirit, science, action, and return. So it's having hope and positive energy. So you want to uncover that positive, which gets into that strengths-based perspective. And then the science is learn, play, and being effective. So how can you use science to measure those gaps? Through learning and playing, that's all tied into those building blocks. Then action. How do we change and transform? So the transformation word that was in our definition for resilience, you want to challenge all those misperceptions. And then return. So we want to rest, reflect, and evaluate. So that's what are we gonna do to increase our health and healing? So those are just some key components of the science of the positive. And then some more are just to, it's a lot about being. So being in the moment, being positive, having that positive mindset, that strengths-based, resilience approach, being present in the moment, perceiving that we're all connected. So we are each other's support, we are each other's community. How do we function within that community? We all have a purpose. There's peace, passionate, proactive. So there's a lot of really cool things. So I will say that I don't really have much time to talk about this, but this is one of those things that are on a resource sheet that we created for you. So a lot of the things that you are going to get from this presentation are going to be on that resource sheet. Some sites that you can link to learn more about these things. So I would definitely encourage you to check that out, and that'll be emailed to you. And then everybody should be familiar with this trauma-informed approach. This is based on SAMHSA's 6 principles. It's really interesting how all these fit together with the HOPE framework as well. So having an environment of safety, the connectedness with having that peer support, empowerment, collaboration, trustworthiness, history, gender, culture, that all fits with those building blocks. So that's just really interesting to me. I wanted to include it. Some other strategies here, recognizing and responding to traumatic stress. You can screen for that. Make sure you're being culturally appropriate. Make sure you have resources available. Building on that resilience and building those protective factors are so critical. Addressing parent and caregiver trauma. Emphasizing a continuity of care and collaboration, and maintaining an environment of care. So that's a lot of different strategies that you can do. And then We have an evaluation here. We have a few minutes if you have questions. I just want to thank you for participating in the chat. I hope you will get a lot out of that resource sheet, and I hope that you'll join us for more presentations in the future if you want to learn more about protective factors. I think somebody put in the chat that that's coming up in May. So you have opportunity for that. And then, feel free to check out that ACEs training if you had not heard about ACEs. That's on our website. So any questions or comments before we try to wrap up?